thank you for coming. Bipartisanship still reigns when it comes to the U.S.-Israel relationship. I am so pleased that the Senate in particular has kept a bipartisan focus on our efforts to secure our own nation and our friends in Israel. So we will be unveiling a resolution that I think is an important statement at an important time. Everybody would like the violence to stop, but we want the violence to end forever. And our belief is that there's no moral equivalency between what's happening between Hamas and Israel. Hamas is doing everything it can to put its civilians at risk, hoping that Israel will attack a target and civilian casualties will ensue for political purposes, and they're doing everything they can to kill Israeli children. The best way to protect Palestinian children is to stop trying to kill Israeli children. And at the end of the day, a ceasefire that leaves Hamas in place is dooming everybody in the Palestinian world who lives under the Hamas yoke and puts Israel at risk. So we're calling on a ceasefire that gets to the heart of the problem. And I believe the heart of the problem is Hamas wants to destroy Israel. And there's no amount of negotiating ever going to get that out of their system. So we hope that a ceasefire will be done upon conditions not to repeat the mistakes of the past. That a ceasefire will be done in such a fashion as Israel can deal with the tunnel threat, which is new and lethal, effectively and permanently. That they can deal with the rocket sites that are being positioned by hospitals, schools, and apartment complexes, that when the ceasefire is done, Israel will have had an opportunity through diplomacy or military action to deal with the threat that faces the Israeli people. And finally, when a ceasefire is done, we hope the Palestinian people will have a chance to live in peace. And that means Hamas has to go as a governing entity. There is no way to get there from here if you leave Hamas in place. We've had 2 ceasefires in the last 4 years, and the same thing happens over and over again. They rearm, they attack again, because the one thing they want is the one thing we're not going to give them, the destruction of the state of Israel. With that, I'll turn it over to Senator Schumer.
Well, thank you, and let me thank you, Lindsey, my partner in so many different issues, and all of our colleagues here today. We all mourn the loss of innocent life on the Israeli and Gaza side of the border. There is one word that describes the reason. There is one word that explains the reason that there is such a loss of innocent life: Hamas. Amen. If Hamas had agreed to ceasefire, which Egypt, a Muslim Arab country, proposed, there wouldn't be such a loss of life. But Hamas doesn't want to do that. And when the last time they agreed to a ceasefire, it lasted about 5 hours. Hamas then continued to launch rockets into Sderot, so the ceasefire was virtually useless. The only way to have a ceasefire that's going to make a difference is to make sure that Hamas no longer has the capability of launching rockets into Israel or sending killers through tunnels into Israel. And so you need a ceasefire that's going to work and be permanent and long-term. And that ceasefire should occur only after Hamas is denuded of the missiles and only after the tunnels are no longer useful. It amazes me, in typical of Hamas, they got a limited amount of concrete into Gaza. They said they needed to construct schools and homes, and what did they use it for? Tunnels. All these tunnels are lined with concrete in an effort to kill Israeli civilians in the kibbutzim along the Gaza border. Many of us are just frustrated with a double standard. We see it on the news, we see it among the commentators, we see it among average folks too sometimes, which is, oh, both sides are equally to blame. That is just not true. Hamas doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist. Hamas has sworn to the destruction of Israeli citizens, and as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, aptly, Israel uses missiles to shield and protect its people. Hamas uses people to protect its missiles.
Kelly.
Thank you. I mean, let's just call Hamas. We know it's a terrorist organization. And what we see happening at this point, there is no moral equivalency between what Israel is doing to defend itself and its people and what Hamas is doing, often using the civilian population in Palestine as shields. And that's the mark of terrorism. So Israel has to have the right to defend itself and to address the means that these terrorists have, not only the tunnels, but we've seen instances where they have actually put in a UN school missiles that they have directed towards Israel and the Israeli people. So this ceasefire, a ceasefire for the sake of a ceasefire that leaves the means in terrorists' hands to continue to terrorize the Israeli people, to terrorize, in many instances, the Palestinians by using civilians for shields. That is not a true ceasefire that will lead to peace. And so we need to make sure that Hamas no longer has the means to be able to terrorize not only the Israeli people with what it has done to lob rockets towards Israel, but also the Palestinian people as they are used as shields and really used completely by Hamas for their means to try to terrorize Israel.
First, let me thank my colleagues for being here. This is clearly a nonpartisan support for what is right, what is fair. Last Thursday, I was proud of the United States Senate. We passed unanimously a resolution that recognized Israel's right to defend itself. It recognized that the violence is being caused by Hamas, a terrorist group. It recognized that Hamas cannot be part of the governing structure of the Palestinian Authority. That was passed unanimously last Thursday. Since that time, as Senator Schumer pointed out, the Egyptians have brought forward a ceasefire. Israel was prepared to move forward on it. Hamas said no. We had a short timeout for humanitarian aid. Israel complied with it. Hamas did not. It's very clear. The world now knows that Hamas has embedded its missiles in schools, in hospitals. It has used human shields. It hides itself, its own network, underneath hospitals and schools in order to try to protect themselves. That is known. It's now clear to everyone what Hamas's strategy is all about. We all want to see peace between Israel and the Palestinians. We want to see that. That has been our dream. That's been our goal. But it's also clear to us that a ceasefire cannot occur until Israel is protected against the missiles entering their country aimed at innocent civilian populations. And it can't end until these tunnels are brought to an end. These are not the tunnels that were on the Egyptian border that were used to bring missiles into the Gaza. These are tunnels being used to terrorize the Israelis, to try to capture Israelis for kidnapping purposes and trying to terrorize the country. That also needs to end. So our message is pretty clear. We want to see a ceasefire. We want to see peace. The missiles from Hamas must end. The tunnels must also end.
Well, I just want to echo the comments made by my colleagues, and just that I think this is the most systematic use of human shields in modern history. It's interesting. There's a video now of leaders of Hamas going on television in Gaza, telling people to go to the rooftops and stand up against Israel, that this was an effective means of resisting. Meanwhile, they're hiding in bunkers. Some of these command centers are underneath hospitals. And I think what's even more outrageous is not just the reaction of Hamas, but the reaction of some in the international community. Just yesterday, the so-called United Nations Human Rights Council, made up of such illustrious members as Cuba and China and others, condemning Israel and calling for an investigation. A 700-word report with not a mention of Hamas, a brief mention of rockets, and no mention of the use of human shields. We have never seen in the modern history of the world any organization use human shields the way Hamas is using human shields in Gaza. It is an outrage, and that's what the international community should be condemning. And to leave these people in a position of power in the aftermath of this conflict means we will have another one and another one. Here's the bottom line. As long as Hamas is in Gaza, there will be no peace in this region, unfortunately.
Well, I think that at a time of partisan differences, this moment is a rare and profoundly important time for us to come together and express our nation's moral revulsion. It's more than just a political sentiment, more than just a sense of what is tactically right, but a moment of deep moral revulsion. That's the sense of outrage that our entire world community should have at this moment when children are used as human shields. That is a systematic practice that is unprecedented in the annals of war. It is the essence of terrorism to destroy innocent lives. That's why it rouses terror. And that's what Hamas is doing here. So a ceasefire will end this conflict for the moment, but it will not absolve of Hamas of the moral responsibility and reprehension for these desperate, despicable tactics.
Any questions? Yes.
Do you believe Israel went too far today in shooting at the school where the UN school where the refugees were held?
No, I don't believe Israel's gone too far at all. Just put yourself in Israel's shoes. How far would we go? What would we do if we were attacked by a neighboring country, missiles coming into our country, tunnels dug under our borders, people pop up in cities in the United States to kidnap and kill our citizens, and the enemy we're facing puts missiles and uses use holy sites, use schools. The press report that one of the UN schools, they found rockets in the school and the UN gave them back to Hamas. That was pretty dumb. So no, I don't find Israel going too far. I find the international community going too far. There is no moral equivalency, as Senator Ayotte said. And I just, the Ukrainian rebels, they're thuggish, they're brutes, they were drunken around a site of human tragedy. These guys are Boy Scouts compared to Hamas.
I don't know of any country that has gone to such extremes to try to protect the civilian population. Everything that they have done is to get innocent people out of harm's way, but with the obligation that Israel has to protect its own citizens from missiles coming into its population centers. So I give Israel a great deal of credit for the manner in which they have tried to warn Palestinians, and obviously they're faced with an unprecedented situation when you have the missiles and control centers embedded into civilian facilities such as schools and hospitals and mosques.
Yeah, and I just say, first, the loss of life at this school is so regrettable, but the blame falls on Hamas's shoulders because they have repeatedly used civilian sites, including schools, to hide missiles. Hamas is the group that urged Palestinians not to flee. Why? The only logical answer is they wanted them killed so they could use them in their propaganda war. And so we regret the loss of life. It's horrible. The reason it's happening is Hamas. That's the problem here. Hamas using people as shields, shooting missiles at Israel, storing those missiles in schools, holy sites, and civilian areas.
You know, there's one other, I think all of us have visited Israel, and some of us together. And we've talked to Israeli leaders about not only this latest situation, but about others that they faced, which perhaps with fewer extremes have involved the same tactics on the part of Hamas. I can tell you, having seen their faces, listened to their voices, the leaders of Israel share the pain and grieve. And they go to every possible length with great emotion, not just intellect, but deep and sincere emotion to avoid these kinds of casualties. So, none of this is done lightly. It is survival. Israel is fighting for survival. And as Senator Graham said so well, if the United States or any other country faced the onslaught, the attack, the aggression, and sought to defend itself as carefully, with such calibration as Israel have done, they would be praised.
Thank you all.